The gap between the economy's productive capacity and the real incomes of middle-income families is wider than it's ever been.
In 2005, real wages fell again. To make up for falling wages, debt soared. Ignoring their plight, Congress rewrote the bankruptcy code so that erasing debt and a clean start are no longer a possibility. Rubbing salt into the wound, Congress pushed ahead with free trade treaties in 2005, which forces American workers to compete with workers earning 50 cents an hour with no benefits.
There is no organized special interest that represents the middle class. We're workers primarily, first and foremost. We're people who want to send your kids to college, take care of your parents, retire in dignity. That doesn't fall into a specific special interest group with a lobbyist presence in Washington.
No one can outproduce or outcompete the American worker.
Corporate greed can keep my taxes, give me health care, give my kids low interest student loans. What happens if somehow something happens and China's no longer a friend? How are we going to produce our hardware?
Starting this year, Sweetin and other middle-class students will face higher interest rates on their federal loans. The House of Representatives passed a bill that cuts billions in Medicaid spending, reduces federal aid for child support collections, and slashes $13 billion in student aid.
This bill stood the principle of shared sacrifice on its head.
The 60,000 American auto workers losing their jobs over the next 3 years don't appear to be a concern for this White House. In fact, Labor Secretary Elaine Chao says American workers are simply suffering from what she called a skills gap. Adding to the insult, President Bush is telling automakers not to expect any help from his administration.
Germany and Japan have protected their industries, while American companies have pursued the lowest cost labor at whatever the cost.
We're quickly running out of jobs for the middle-class workers to do.
Frequently, what is lost in all of this discussion about what's next is what's happened over the last 30 years to workers' paychecks. Real wages have fallen.
You would have people making $400 or $500 a week.
But then the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, passed.
Ross Perot, the great sucking sound, he was exactly correct.
Keeping America competitive requires us to open more markets. With open markets and a level playing field, no one can outproduce or outcompete the American worker.
I don't believe we have a level playing field.
America has created 4.6 million new jobs.
But not high-paying jobs. Stagnant wages, historically low household savings. Not a murmur from Mr. Bush on these issues. The latest evidence of the war in the middle class in this country comes in a new report from the Conference of Mayors. It finds the new jobs being created in our country pay significantly less than the jobs they replace, 21% less to be exact.
On average, $9,000 a year less. Middle-class working people are sharing less and less in the economic wealth.
Essentially, what keeps the U.S. economy going is consumption. That's the big thing. And if you squeeze wages hard enough, you won't have enough consumption demand to sustain an economic recovery.
The mayors are concerned because as wages fall, so does the tax base and the ability of a city to deliver on services.
But Labor Secretary Elaine Chao doesn't seem bothered about it all. She said there are plenty of jobs for laid-off Ford workers to move into. The Labor Secretary says the only thing U.S. workers are suffering from is, quote, a skills gap. And U.S. manufacturers who complain of a skills gap in nearly every instance are simply using code words for an opportunity to look for cheap labor, to cut wages and benefits, to outsource jobs, and to hire more of that cheap foreign labor.